What if I told you the greatest conqueror in history was no longer feared by his enemies, but by his own army? Pause. The men who once followed him to the edge of the world, who called him a god, who would die for him without hesitation, began to whisper in the dark. Has Alexander gone mad? Pause. This is the story of how Alexander the Great, the undefeated king, became the man his own soldiers feared. Classical background 2230. Epic cinematic music. To understand the fear, you must first understand the legend. Born in 356 BCE, trained by the great philosopher Aristotle and inspired by heroes like Achilles, Alexander was not just a king. He believed he was destined for greatness. Pause. By the age of 30, he had conquered the mighty Persian Empire, defeated kings, destroyed armies, and marched his forces across deserts, mountains, and unknown lands. His soldiers worshipped him. They called him invincible. They believed he was chosen by the gods. Pause. But something changed, far from home, deep in the lands of the East. New Moon Rising Mystery 23500. Wind sound low, eerie music. The further Alexander marched, the more distant he became. No longer just a king, he began to act like something else. Something divine. Pause. He adopted foreign customs, wore the robes of Persian kings, and demanded something unthinkable from his men. He wanted them to bow before him. Pause. Silence. To the Greeks and Macedonians, this was not respect. This was worship. And worship was only for gods. Heartbeat sound increases. So the whispers began. Why does he want us to kneel? Does he still see us as brothers or as subjects? Pause. For the first time, his army felt something they had never felt before. Not doubt, not exhaustion, but fear. Crossed Main Events Part 1, 500800. Tense music builds. Then came the moment that changed everything. A man named Philotas, one of Alexander's trusted commanders, was accused of conspiracy. The evidence? Unclear. The truth? Even more uncertain. Pause. But Alexander didn't hesitate. Philotas was tortured, forced to confess, and executed. Sharp sound effect. And then Alexander did something even more shocking. He ordered the death of Philotas' father, Parmenion, a loyal general, a man who had served him for years, a man who wasn't even present to defend himself. Pause. Silence. No trial, no warning. Just death. Heartbeat sound. Now the army was no longer whispering. They were watching. Carefully. Because if a loyal general could be killed without question, who would be next? Question mark. Engagement QSTONS. Soft, eerie tone. Would you still follow a leader if loyalty meant nothing? Pause. Or would you start to fear that one day you might be the next to fall? Waxing crescent moon ending. Slow, dark music fades in. This was only the beginning. Because soon Alexander would cross a line that no king, no hero should ever cross. Pause. And when he did, even his closest friends would not be safe. Heartbeat fades. His generals executed, his loyal men silenced. Pause. And now, the army of Alexander the Great was no longer marching with pride. They were marching in fear. Pause. But what happened next would shatter everything. Crossed Main Events Part 2, The Night of Blood 3430. Tense music slowly rising, sound of distant laughter and cups clinking. It was supposed to be a celebration. A feast, wine flowing, victories remembered. Pause. Among those present was one of Alexander's closest companions, Cleitus the Black, a man who had once saved Alexander's life in battle. A man who fought beside him, bled beside him, trusted him. Pause. But that night something changed. Heartbeat sound begins. The wine loosened tongues, and Cleitus spoke boldly. He reminded Alexander of the truth, that it was not just him, but the Macedonian soldiers who had built this empire. Pause. He criticized Alexander's growing arrogance, his obsession with being treated like a god, his rejection of his own people. Silence. The room froze. Fire the moment of madness. 4:36:30. Heartbeat grows louder, dark music intensifies. Alexander enraged. His face twisted with anger, his pride shattered in front of others. Pause. At first he argued. Then he shouted. Then he lost control. Sharp sound effect. In a sudden burst of fury, Alexander grabbed a spear. Pause. Silence. And drove it straight into Cleitus. Heartbeat stops. The room went silent. Cleitus, the man who once saved his life, collapsed to the ground. Dead. Waxing crescent moon aftermath. Fear TAKS Route 6:38:30. Slow, haunting music. For a moment even Alexander didn't understand what he had done. Pause. Then the realization hit him. He had killed his friend. Not in battle, not for betrayal, but in anger. Pause. It is said he tried to take his own life afterward, overcome with guilt. But the damage was already done. Wind sound. The army saw everything. And in that moment, something broke. Brain rising fear. 8:30-10:30. Low eerie tone. If Alexander could kill Cleitus, who was safe? Pause. Not loyalty, not friendship, not even love. Heartbeat resumed slowly. The soldiers no longer saw him as just a king. They saw a man who could snap at any moment. A man who believed he was divine, above judgment, above consequence. Pause. And that is the most dangerous kind of ruler. Question mark engagement QSTONS. Soft dark tone. What would you do if your leader became unpredictable? Pause. Would you stay loyal, or would you start planning your escape? Pause. Or worse, would you begin to fear the man you once admired? New Moon ending part 2. Dark music deepens. But the fear was about to grow even stronger. Because Alexander's ambition was far from over. Pause. He would push his army beyond their limits, into lands they did not want to go. And when they finally said enough, pause, Alexander would face something he had never faced before. Rebellion. Heartbeat fades. He killed his own general, his own friend. Pause. And now, the army of Alexander the Great was no longer loyal by choice. They were loyal by fear. Pause. But even fear has its limits. Globe showing Asia, Australia, the edge of the world, 0:33:00. Wind blowing, mysterious ambient music. Alexander wasn't done. Not even close. Pause. After conquering the Persian Empire, he pushed further east. Into unknown lands, into unfamiliar cultures. Into India. Pause. The battles were harder, the lands were stranger, and the enemies. They fought differently. Drum beats slowly rising. War elephants, massive armies, relentless resistance. Pause. Even after victory, the cost was heavy. The soldiers were exhausted, homesick, broken. But Alexander, he wanted more. Crossed the final demand 3, 5:30. Tense music builds. Standing before his army, Alexander gave the order. March forward. Pause. Beyond the Hyphasis River, deeper into lands no Greek had ever seen. Pause. But this time, something was different. No cheers, no excitement, no pride. Pause. Silence. Only silence. Fire the Rebellion 5:38:30. Heartbeat grows louder, storm sound in background. For the first time, his army refused him. Pause. The man who had never lost a battle was now facing something far more dangerous. Disobedience. Pause. A respected officer, Cohen Hughes, stepped forward. Not with a sword, but with truth. Pause. He spoke of the soldiers' suffering, their endless battles, their longing to return home. He warned Alexander that pushing them further could destroy everything. Silence. The entire army stood behind him. High voltage. The king vs his army 8:30:11:00. Dark dramatic music. Alexander was furious. His pride, his dream of conquering the world, was slipping away. Pause. He tried to inspire them. He tried to command them. He tried to shame them. But nothing worked. Pause. For 3 days, he locked himself away. Low wind sound. No orders, no words. Only silence. Waxing crescent moon. The moment of defeat. 11:00:12:30. Slow, emotional music. Then finally, Alexander emerged. Pause. And for the first time in his life, he gave in. Soft echo. He ordered the retreat. Brain the realization. 12:30:14:30. Haunting music. But this was more than just a retreat. Pause. It was the moment his army realized something terrifying. Alexander was no longer unstoppable. Pause. He was human. And yet, he still believed he was a god. Heartbeat sound. That contradiction made him even more dangerous. Question mark engagement. QSTONS. Soft eerie tone. What happens when a man believes he is unstoppable, but the world begins to resist him? Pause. And what happens when his own army is the one that says no? New moon ending. Part 3. Dark music slowly fades in. The march back would not be peaceful. Pause. Because Alexander's frustration, his anger, his obsession with power, was about to take an even darker turn. Pause. And this time, it wouldn't just be fear. It would be destruction. Heartbeat fades slowly. Pausanias ran not like a warrior, but like a man hunted by his own past. Pause. Through the streets of Sparta, past the very people who once praised him, he ran toward the only place he believed could save him. A temple. Sacred. Untouchable. In ancient Greece, temples were not just buildings. They were the homes of the gods. And no man, not even Sparta, dared to spill blood inside them. Pause. If you entered a temple, you were under divine protection. And Pausanias knew that. Inside the temple, quiet echoing ambience, breathing heavily, his heart racing. Pausanias stepped inside. Dark stone walls surrounded him. The air was cold, still, almost suffocating. Pause. For the first time, the great Spartan general was afraid. Outside, Spartan soldiers began to gather, weapons ready, eyes filled not with respect, but with anger. A dangerous dilemma. Low-tension music. The Spartans faced a problem. A serious one. Pause. They could not kill him inside the temple. That would anger the gods, bring curses upon the city. But they could not let him go either. He was now a traitor, a threat. So they made a decision so cruel, it would echo through history. The order. Dramatic pause, heartbeat sound returns. The order came. Cold. Final. They would not enter the temple. They would not attack him. Pause. Instead, they would seal him inside. Brick by brick, stone by stone. They began to close the entrance. The moment H-E-R-E-L-I-Z-D. Slow, haunting music. At first, Pausanias didn't understand. He watched as the light at the doorway grew smaller, then smaller, then almost gone. Pause. And in that moment, he realized the truth. They weren't coming for him. They were leaving him. To die. The final light. Heartbeat slows. The last ray of sunlight faded from the temple floor. Darkness swallowed everything. Pause. Outside, the walls were sealed. Inside, Pausanias was alone. No food. No water. No escape. Just silence. And time. Days of suffering. Slow ticking sound. Hours passed. Then days. At first he shouted. Called for mercy. For reason. Pause. But no one answered. His voice grew weaker. His body weaker. The man who once commanded armies could no longer stand. The twist, a mother's decision. Deep emotional music begins. But the most shocking moment was yet to come. Among the crowd outside was someone unexpected. Someone who had known Pausanias long before he became a hero. His mother. Pause. She watched in silence as the temple was sealed, as her son was left to die. And then she stepped forward. According to ancient accounts, it was she who placed the first stone. Long pause. Imagine that. A mother helping seal her own son's fate. Why? Because in Sparta, loyalty to the state came before everything. Even family. His final moments. Soft, sorrowful music. Inside the darkness, Pausanias lay on the cold stone floor. Weak. Broken. Alone. Some say he begged the gods for forgiveness. Others say he cursed Sparta until his final breath. But no one truly knows his last words. Pause. Because no one was there to hear them. A cruel mercy. Low, mysterious tone. But here's something even more disturbing. When Pausanias was close to death, the Spartans opened the temple, not to save him. Pause. But to take him out, before he died inside, because they feared something strange. If he died inside the temple, it would still anger the gods. So they dragged his dying body out. And only then let him die. The final truth. Dark music slowly rises. And just like that, the hero of Plataea was gone. No funeral, no honor, no glory, only a story filled with suspicion, fear, and unanswered questions. Was he really guilty? Pause. Even today, historians are divided. Was Pausanias truly a traitor? A man blinded by ambition? Or was he a victim of politics, jealousy, and fear of his growing power? Because one thing is certain. Pause. Sparta did not forgive greatness if it became dangerous. Final emotional closing. Slow cinematic music. Pausanias saved Greece. He defeated its greatest enemy. He became a legend. And in the end, his own people turned him into a warning that in Sparta, even heroes are not safe. Pause. Because sometimes the greatest threat is not your enemy, it is your own people.